My name is Richard. I'm 81 years old. There are secrets you keep from the people you love, and then there are secrets you keep about them. I lived with both kinds for 43 years, and for most of my marriage, I read my wife's diary without her knowing. She died 3 years ago, still believing her thoughts were private. I'm not here to defend what I did. I'm here to tell you what it cost me, and what it taught me, and why I'm only now beginning to understand the difference. Margaret and I met in 1965 at a church social in upstate New York. I was 24, fresh out of college, working as a junior accountant at a firm in Albany. She was 22, a schoolteacher with dark hair and a laugh that made everyone in the room turn around. We talked for 3 hours that night. I asked her to dinner the following weekend. 6 months later, I proposed. We were married in the spring of 1966, and I thought I knew everything about her. I was wrong. About a year into our marriage, I came home early from work one afternoon. Margaret wasn't there. She'd mentioned she was going to visit her sister, so I had the house to myself. I was looking for a book on the shelf in our bedroom when I noticed a small leather journal tucked between 2 novels. I pulled it out. The cover was plain, dark blue, with no title. I opened it to the first page and saw Margaret's handwriting. January 1966, it said at the top. My wedding year. I should have closed it right then. I should have put it back and never thought about it again. But I didn't. I started reading. The first entry was from a week before our wedding. She wrote about how excited she was, how she couldn't wait to start our life together. She wrote about the dress she'd chosen, about how her mother cried when she tried it on. It was sweet, innocent, the kind of thing you'd expect a bride to write. But then, towards the end of the entry, she wrote something that stopped me cold. She said, I hope I'm making the right choice. I love Richard, but sometimes I wonder if love is enough. Sometimes I wonder if I'm settling. I sat on the edge of the bed and read that line over and over. Settling. She wondered if she was settling. For me, I told myself it was just nerves. Every bride has doubts, right? It didn't mean anything. But I couldn't stop thinking about it, and I couldn't stop myself from reading more. Over the next few weeks, I'd wait until Margaret was out of the house, and I'd pull that journal off the shelf and read. I told myself I'd only read a little, just enough to understand what she was feeling. But every time I opened it, I found something that made me want to keep going. She wrote about her students, about her friends, about little frustrations with her family. And she wrote about me. Not often, but enough. Most of it was kind. She'd write about things we did together, about conversations we had, about moments that made her happy. But every now and then, there'd be a line that felt like a knife. Richard doesn't understand me the way I wish he did. Sometimes I feel like I'm talking to a wall. I wonder what it would have been like if I'd married someone else. I knew I should stop reading. I knew it was a violation of her privacy. But I couldn't, because every time I read something that hurt, I also read something that reassured me. She'd write about loving me. She'd write about being grateful for our life together. And I convinced myself that as long as the good outweighed the bad, it was okay. As long as she loved me more than she doubted me, I could live with it. So I kept reading for 43 years. Margaret kept that diary for most of our marriage. She didn't write in it every day, Sometimes she'd go weeks or even months without an entry, but she always came back to it. Over the years, the journal changed. She filled the first one and started a second, then a third, then a fourth. She kept them all on the same shelf, tucked between the same two novels. I knew exactly where to find them, and I read every single one. I learned things about Margaret that she never told me out loud. I learned that she had a miscarriage before our first son was born, and she didn't tell me because she didn't want me to worry. I learned that she resented me for working so much when the kids were young, even though she never said anything. I learned that she almost left me once in 1979 after a fight we had about money. She'd even packed a suitcase and written a letter, but she changed her mind before I got home from work. I never knew any of it until I read it in her diary. Some of what I read was beautiful. She wrote about the day our oldest son was born, about how proud she was of me when I got promoted, about a trip we took to Maine for our 20th anniversary, and how it was one of the happiest weeks of her life. She wrote about small moments, too. A Sunday morning when I made her coffee and brought it to her in bed. A night when we danced in the kitchen to a song on the radio. She wrote that she loved me in ways I didn't even realize. But some of what I read broke me. She wrote about feeling lonely, even when I was sitting right next to her. She wrote about wishing I'd ask her more questions, wishing I'd notice when she was upset without her having to tell me. She wrote about a man she worked with in the 1980s, a colleague who made her laugh, and she admitted she had feelings for him. She never acted on them, but she thought about it. She wrote, "Sometimes I wonder what my life would have been like if I'd been braver." Reading that felt like being gutted, but I couldn't confront her about it, because then I'd have to admit I'd been reading her diary. So I said nothing. I just carried it. I carried all of it. The worst part wasn't the doubts or the regrets, or even the confession about the other man. The worst part was realizing that Margaret was living a parallel life in those pages. There was the Margaret I knew, the one who smiled and cooked dinner and asked about my day. And then there was the Margaret in the diary, the one who was scared and lonely, and wondering if she'd made a mistake. And I had access to both versions of her, but she only ever saw one version of me. Because here's the thing, I never let her see my doubts. I never told her when I was scared or uncertain or struggling. I thought being a good husband meant being strong, being steady, being the person she could rely on. So I kept everything to myself. And in doing so, I created the exact same distance she was writing about. She felt lonely because I never let her in, and I felt lonely because I was reading about her loneliness instead of asking her about it. I could have stopped at any time. I could have closed the journals and never opened them again. I could have talked to her. I could have told her I wanted to understand her better, that I wanted her to feel seen. But I didn't, because I was afraid. I was afraid that if I admitted I didn't know her as well as I thought I did, it would mean I'd failed as a husband. So I kept reading, and I kept pretending. And the years went by. Margaret got sick in 2019, pancreatic cancer. The doctors said it was stage 4, that there wasn't much they could do. She lived for 8 months after the diagnosis. During that time, I stayed by her side. I took her to appointments. I sat with her during chemo. I held her hand when she was too weak to get out of bed. And the whole time, I thought about the journals. I thought about reading them one last time to see if she'd written anything new, but I couldn't bring myself to do it. It felt wrong, somehow, to invade her privacy when she was dying. So I didn't. I just stayed with her, and I tried to be the husband she needed. A few days before she died, Margaret asked me to sit with her. She was in bed, too weak to move much, but her mind was still sharp. She looked at me and said, "Richard, do you think I was a good wife?" I was stunned. I told her of course she was. I told her she was the best thing that ever happened to me. She smiled, but there was something sad in her eyes. She said, "I always worried I wasn't enough for you, that you deserved someone better." I wanted to tell her everything in that moment. I wanted to tell her I'd read her journals, that I knew about her doubts, that I understood her fears. I wanted to tell her that she was more than enough, that I was the one who wasn't enough, that I'd spent our entire marriage hiding behind a version of myself I thought she wanted, instead of showing her who I really was. But I didn't. I just held her hand and told her I loved her. And a few days later, she was gone. After the funeral, I went back to our bedroom. I stood in front of the bookshelf and stared at the journals. There were 6 of them now, spanning more than 4 decades. I thought about burning them. I thought about throwing them away. But I couldn't. So I pulled them down, one by one, and I read them all again. This time, it was different. This time, I wasn't reading to find out what she thought of me. I was reading to understand who she was, and what I found was a woman who loved deeply, who worried constantly, who wanted so badly to be known, but didn't know how to ask. I found a woman who was scared of being ordinary, who wondered if her life mattered, who wanted to be more than just a wife and mother, but didn't know how to say it out loud. I found a woman who loved me, even when she wasn't sure she should. And I realized something that I should have realized 40 years ago. Margaret didn't need me to be perfect. She needed me to be present. She needed me to ask her how she was feeling, to notice when she was struggling, to tell her my own fears so she didn't feel so alone in hers. She needed a partner, not a provider. And I gave her the wrong thing. I think about the life we could have had if I'd just talked to her, if I'd told her I was scared too, if I'd asked her about the things she wrote in her journal instead of reading them in secret. If I'd let her see the parts of me I kept hidden, maybe she would have felt safe enough to show me the parts of herself she kept hidden too. Maybe we could have been lonely together, and in that loneliness, found connection. But I didn't. I read her diary for 43 years, and I never told her. She died thinking her thoughts were private. She died not knowing I knew everything. And I don't know if that was a kindness or a betrayal. I don't know if keeping her secret protected her, or just protected me from having to face my own failures. What I do know is this: love is not about knowing everything. It's about being willing to ask. It's about creating a space where the people you love feel safe enough to tell you the truth, even when the truth is hard. I thought reading Margaret's diary would help me understand her, but all it did was show me how much I didn't know, and how much I was too afraid to find out. If you love someone, don't do what I did. Don't hide behind your fears. Don't convince yourself that silence is strength. Don't wait until it's too late to ask the questions that matter. Because one day, the person you love will be gone, and you'll be left holding their secrets, wishing you'd had the courage to hear them out loud. I'm 81 years old. My wife has been gone for 3 years, and I'm still learning who she was, one journal entry at a time. I just wish I'd learned it from her.